Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
All right, welcome back to The Law Show on CL 650. Today we're focusing on immigration law. We have Gordon Maynard and Alex Stojcevic from MKS Law in Yaletown. I guess it's great. You're right on the Canada line, right? So it's
right
easy
on
for
the Canada line. Yep.
Very easy to get to if you're going downtown Vancouver. Don't have to pay for parking. So we've been talking through the show about getting basically parents and grandparents into the country. Somebody's come into the country. They have a job here. They have status in Canada, and now they want to bring mom and dad or the grandparents here. So we've talked about how there was only a one-day window to do it the traditional way. Is there any other way to get them in that maybe doesn't go that route? Is there something else that, is there any hope left?
Now you have to be creative. So what we do with our clients now is we sit down and we try to talk to everyone, the parents, the sponsors. What are everyone's concerns? What do they want to do when they're in Canada? Is there a desire to open up a business? Is there a desire to work? Is there a desire to just look after children? Are they going to be seasonally in Canada, or is this a permanent move? What is their health like? What kind of background do they have? Based on the answers to those questions, it is sometimes possible to look at other alternatives. And those really come down to the individual characteristics of the family that we're dealing with.
So what can you give me a scenario?
Sure. Some people run into situations where there is no rational answer to what they need to do except keep mother here. Mm-hmm. That's the only option. There's nobody else to take care of her. There's no other resources at home. This is the only option. So at all costs, keep her here. That may have the sufficiency for a humanitarian and compassionate ground application.
So the mother comes or the grandma comes and just doesn't go back.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's not that simple. I mean, you can't just say, well, she's an overstay, I want her to stay here. Mm-hmm. There has to be more to it than that. Mm-hmm. It's not every situation is going to support a humanitarian and compassionate grounds application. And humanitarian and compassionate grounds applications are very strenuous. They're time-consuming. Your status here is very uncertain during the time that you're here. You need to have financial support because you will not get it otherwise. And you need to have medical coverage. So it's a difficult process, but that may be an option.
And it's something we have a lot of experience.
Right.
Another option may be don't do immigration. Do visiting. Mm-hmm. You do have a super visa option.
Yeah, I've heard this. I have a friend of mine whose wife is from mainland China, and she was the one who told me about this super visa. I hadn't really heard about it before. What is it and how does it work?
It's the idea that parents should be given greater ease of visiting opportunities, particularly from countries that are visa requiring. If you have a grandmother who lives in England or Germany or Western Europe or the United States, it's easy for them to come to Canada. They hop on a plane and they come here for a visit. But if you're from China or the Eastern Bloc, former Eastern Bloc countries, South America, you need a visa. Mm-hmm. And so you need to apply to come here. And typically it's been very difficult because if you bring mother here, then she's not going to go back. She's going to stay here and make an H&C application. Mm-hmm. And so one of the shifts they made a few years ago was to promote the idea of giving long-term visas to parents to facilitate long-term visits to Canada, up to 2 years at a time.
And how long a break in between those 2-year visits?
Well, they'd prefer if you went back for another 2 years.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But you can extend them. It's remarkable how flexible that has been, especially given the history. The history was that if you tried to sponsor your parents, the way our system worked was for you to get a temporary resident visa, you had to show that your intention long-term was temporary. So if you've already applied for permanent residence, for example, and you were stuck in a 7-year backlog, that usually was game over for your temporary resident visa.
No visitor visa.
Because your intention was to come
permanently. And stay, yeah.
Well, this was actually a good innovation from that perspective, and this was a very sensible reform that the Conservatives came up with, because it actually encouraged people to get visas and at least deal with the well, does that mean I can't come to Canada while I'm waiting for my permanent residence? It at least dealt with that problem. And
yeah, but it also fit into their program to diminish family immigration. If parents were satisfied to come here as visitors without making the commitment to a PR application and permanent stay in Canada, then you can fit your economic numbers and keep them down to 25% of the overall.
And then you get the benefit that we talked about earlier in the show of having childcare while the parents go to work and all those sorts of things. That's exactly what happened with my friends' families. The parents, they had 2 children, one after the other, and they were basically here for 2 years helping with the children.
The kicker, though, is the system only works as well as it actually works. And many people do make applications that are favorable under the super visa, and others are turned down.
So the real key thing, though, with the super visa, and I don't know that we've touched on that, but Gordon has now alluded to it. To be eligible for a super visa, you need to have private medical insurance.
Okay.
And that private medical insurance is either costly or not costly, depending on whether or not how old you are, pre-existing conditions,
So obviously, the older your parents are, the harder it's going to be to get that.
And
that's always been the problem. The older your parents are, the harder it is to bring them to Canada.
So we'll go back to that initial family member that really has no option but to be with their children to help support them, because at home it's not going to work. There's nothing there for them. So 2 years comes, and then they have to go back. Can they turn around and come back again? That's what I'm getting at.
If they're from a visa-requiring country, they're dependent on having a visa that's valid.
So, but they could go up to 10 years, right?
They can go up to 10 years.
So can you stay for 10 years? I'm just trying to get the nuance here.
Generally not. You can apply to extend your visitor status beyond the 2 years without leaving. We've had clients that have gone to 3. Beyond 3, it's hard. I've rarely seen where it's more than 3 years.
You got to understand the difference between a visa and your visitor status in Canada. The visa gets you on the airplane and gets you to the border.
Sure.
The guy at the border decides how long he's going to let you in for. And if you've been making a habit of spending all your time in Canada, he's going to say, no, it's time for you to go back and spend some time back home. I don't care about your super visa.
But this is, back to your point, is that if you're showing that you want to come to Canada full time, should you apply for, what's your advice to somebody who is in a dire situation, needs to have mom or dad near them? What do you say to them? Continue to try and apply to get them in a permanent status, or use this system?
Depends. They're not always, the thing about a super visa is that it may not make sense for everybody's situation.
That's right.
If you don't have anywhere else to go to, it's not really going to help you very much.
No.
Because it's
short term, though.
Short term it will help, but not long term. But there are the types of applicants who really are only immigrating because, and this is why I say it's important to talk to everybody. There are plenty of people whose idea of the kids is to make sure mom and dad have permanent residence, but where mom and dad aren't necessarily wedded to the idea of being here and nowhere else. So, everybody's situation is slightly different. And the super visa can accommodate the parent in that situation, especially where they're not interested in living here and nowhere else right now. So,
but that's not a situation we're talking about where they don't have a plan B. This is
if there is no plan B, then a super visa is a poor alternative.
Right. So
so is the H&C application sometimes. Sometimes it's your only hope, but the H&C application can be a very difficult, uncomfortable process.
But, we've had very good luck with it in the right circumstances. Certainly, if you're dealing with a single parent, a widow or a widower, where you can show that there really is no family back home, or where there's a really bad situation in the home country,
politically,
like Eastern Ukraine, or at the moment in Syria or in Iraq. People have been loath in other times to use this system or use the application that is in place because there was a high rate of refusal at one point. But the right application can still work.
Now back to the initial proper way to come in, to put the application in, and how long are we waiting now?
For what?
To get a parent into Canada if you applied this January?
It's a very good question. The traditional waiting time over the last 10 years has been about 40 to 80 months on average.
Wow.
And where the differential was when you applied and where your parents live. Because how the approach was before was there was a processing deadline or a processing backlog that was in Mississauga. And then once they transferred the application for the second part to a visa post abroad, there was a second backlog at the visa post.
Right.
And that second visa post, if it was a short one, you got the benefit of that. But if it was a long one, then you basically had to wait 2 4-year periods.
So what's the best way to get in touch with you guys? Somebody's listening to this, they thinking this is something I want to talk farther about. MKS Law in Yaletown, vancouverlaw.ca. You guys easy to get hold of?
Yep.
Send us an email at info@vancouverlaw.ca. Call us at 604-632-0188. And we're
Is there a backlog? A joke. It's a joke.
No backlog.
A lot shorter than the government.
A lot shorter than the government.
I just thought I'd throw that in there. It's been a pleasure having MKS Law here today. Gordon Maynard and Alex Stojcevic, thank you very much for coming into the Law Show on CL 650. We'll do it again soon in the next few weeks. I'm Zach Spencer. We'll speak to you next time right here on CL 650.